What to do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendation, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. If on a dark and stormy night, you're desiring a warm drink to warm the depths of your heart, we at the Brothers on Books go with Encha, the best matcha for the best brothers. And now our listeners will get 20% off. You can use the coupon code or link in the show notes posted below. And then finally, we've just partnered with New Recover, the best recovery process for all of your physical ailments, using both steam saunas and cold plungers. And now our listeners can get 10% off, and the link and code will be posted in the show notes. With that said, I'm Alex Alwa. With me as always, my brother Jack. Jack, how you doing?
Doing great, Al. It's early morning, but always great to talk books with you. How's everything in Birmingham?
That it is. It is very early. Yeah, everything's hunky-dory here. The weather has been, I guess I would say, uncooperative. I've been rained out the past 2 days. It makes me a little anxious when I can't get out and get my playfulness on.
I thought
Because
I thought they have the pickleball courts under the highways in Birmingham.
uh, there's one court under a highway, but it's so hard to get to. I often don't drive. We do have covered courts, but it's like a 40-minute drive each way for me. So
I see.
during the week, a lot of times I don't want to do it.
Okay.
And not I wouldn't necessarily say per usual, but I was definitely behind on my reading last night, and I needed to hunker down and get her done, as they
Yep.
say. So I guess with that said, Jack, what book are we doing today?
Today we are reading our second selection of Gad Saad in The Sad Truth About Happiness: 8 Secrets for Leading the Good Life. Al, this was your selection. You also selected the first book we discussed on Gad Saad, The Parasitic Mind, where we were talking about the attack of the scientific method. But Gad Saad is known as a happy character and has elected to put his happiness formula into a book.
Yeah, that he has. Yeah. So I think when we did the Parasitic Mind, I think I first heard him on the Patrick Bet-David uh podcast, the PBD podcast.
Okay.
And then I think I heard him on Rogan as well. And I just really liked him. And I think I originally wanted to pick this book first. And then I vaguely remember seeing someone say you should read The Parasitic Mind or something first.
Mm-hmm.
So I was also I was somewhat probably more interested in the content of that book because, I feel like he has a lot of similar philosophies to me about his feelings of universities and the route at which universities are going, that more aligned with the Parasitic Mind. But I really enjoyed this book, Sad Truth About Happiness. I thought it was very easy to read. It didn't take me very long. It's pretty short. It's only 200 pages. But yeah, those were my initial thoughts. What about you?
Yeah, I'm always appreciative when you pick shorter reads. And there's something about him. I don't know if it's because he likes soccer, or I just feel like of all the authors we've read, he seems to fit kind of well, at least I feel like he's the closest to me of any of the authors we've read, just on a
Yes.
personal level, I think.
Yeah. I feel like I can really relate to him in
Yeah.
many, many regards. It's sort of
It,
weird.
yeah, in the idea of it's not, and we've touched on this in mastery. I think the idea of specializing versus being kind of like a general practitioner or a polymath. And I believe he's very much on the polymath track. And I'd like to think that I am too, or that's at least how I try to operate. Just try to learn at least a little about a lot of things and just kind of follow my curiosity and try to align what he is calling, I believe, like your actual self with your ideal self.
Yeah.
And this message I like.
I don't know if you got this feeling, and I don't know if it has to do with the fact that they're both Lebanese, but the way he writes, I feel is very similar in some regards to how like Taleb writes, like when I'm reading it. I don't know if it's just that they both use, they both talk
I,
about like walking and thinking a lot, and they
yeah.
both talk about they use a lot of the same jargon as well, which I sort of found
I
interesting
I
because
I would almost I mean the fact that he uses the phrase anti-fragile a lot. I feel like
right,
anti-fragile was a term coined by
point by
Taleb.
Taleb, right. And he also used
So
he also used the term flaneur at some point, which I don't think I've ever heard anywhere else outside of those two. I mean, I know they're close. Like I've heard them do episodes together.
uh-huh. I
Um,
think it's just like, you know, the old school educated people like almost always learned in French and there's this like French influence. And I see this a little bit like when I go to Vienna, like there's still like the very like hoity-toity like French school where
okay.
like you know, people pay their kids to go learn and be educated in the French language and be so sophisticated. So I feel like
Right.
they have an underlying like influence by that type of and they're both from Lebanon and
I guess he grew up in Montreal, so there would have been a very big French influence there.
true,
I guess
true.
the tail point of that anecdote is I don't get the same uh like when Taleb writes, you can clearly see he has angst. To me, it feels like he has sort of like angst for everyone. Like he doesn't like academics, he doesn't like, industrial like professionals.
hmm
And you kind of like get that with Gad Saad, but it doesn't, it seems like almost more, he comes off in a more like jovial manner. It's not as like sort of vitriolic, I guess.
Yeah, he's less, yeah, exactly, less malicious, and he honestly just comes off as a happier person, and that's
Right.
probably why he chose to. He
To
he
write this
said a lot
book.
of people had commented on how happy he seemed, and then he's like, oh, maybe I should put this in a book, get paid for what
Right.
I've discovered over these years of being happy.
Yeah. Or as he says, get paid for half of what he's discovered because
Yeah.
the Canadian government.
That's true. You're right. He does. Yeah, I kind of forget. Like, yeah, he does, and he did say when he found out that he does go into like these depressions, but he's not going to let that hold him down.
Keep him down, right?
I didn't realize he was such a high soccer player. Like, I mean, I don't know how many people actually live in Quebec, but I mean, how many people in Canada? Like 20 million, or is it more?
Uh, I have no idea.
I don't know. I
For
mean,
the
I
sake of
mean,
this episode, let me just look it up real quick.
the
That sounds a, that sounds about right.
because I mean, I didn't realize I kind of thought he was over exa or maybe over talking
40 million.
himself on his soccer stuff. But I mean, if he was on like the state team or like in the championship, and I didn't understand he had that bad leg
Like,
injury.
well,
Uh,
that was sort of interesting because he made it sound like the guy that did that was like close to 35. So it would be odd.
I think he just looking, he meant.
Oh, okay. But it was sort of interesting that I mean, I guess when I was reading that, I didn't know, like he said, I didn't know how big of a hotbed Canada in the 80s was for soccer.
Right, yeah.
So like how, I'm sure he was very good, uh, but
But I
it's
mean, like
hard.
one thing, I mean, even when we were like, he mentioned like maybe going to Europe. I mean, looking back, I have a similar thought. Like, yeah, maybe because when I moved to Charlotte, I played with some young kids for pickup a couple times, and they said they were going to go to Europe and play. And like that thought like never crossed my mind when we were younger, really.
The
I
thought, the
don't
thought of like not going to college and trying to go play
Right,
soccer.
exactly.
Yeah, right.
And while the time's ticking, maybe I mean, I had a lot of injury problems already in high school, but maybe and then I mean, we did try out for the Detroit team, but I think I was already kind of out of full soccer shape by then. Uh, but it's interesting that his one big regret was not pursuing a professional soccer career. Um, well, I guess should we how is there anything you really want to discuss, or should we just like run through the 8 things and then just stop on, or is there any other topic you want to start with?
I mean, I was saying, I was sort of thinking kind of just if you go to the very end, he chronologically just go. I was thinking we should just maybe list out
Sure.
the 8 things for a happy life, and then we can either talk by them point by point or just kind of go over what we, I guess, truly stood out to us. So I guess number one is I don't know if he says these are in order of importance. I think he kind of does, at least for the first two. I think he alludes to the fact that the first two are the most important, but I don't know if they then go in decreasing order. But finding the right spouse is one, working in the right profession is two, seeking the sweet spot, so moderation across many life domains, engaging life via playful mindset, pursuing variety seeking at times across many domains, ensuring that one is persistent in the pursuit of meaningful goals, being anti-fragile when dealing with failure, and then seeking to minimize future regret in part by living an authentic life. So I guess, what did you, I guess, why don't you just start? Like,
I
what really stuck out to you?
I think the last one, actually, seeking to minimize future regret. I think that one kind of encapsulates all of the others.
Yes, I
I
agree.
I think, and he brings up the story of Bezos starting Amazon and how, he was working and he had this thought like of this company, and he envisioned himself, forecasted himself into the future, like, an 80-year-old looking back, like, would he regret not at least attempting to start this company? And he's like, I would not have any regrets about starting the company. And even if it fails, like, at least I would have given it a shot. But if I don't even attempt this, I will regret this. And that's how it's kind of like that rock. I think they called it like visualizing like yourself in the rocking chair, at 80 and 85 and trying to minimize future regret. And I think that is, if I were to like summarize I think I would, the pursuit of happiness is just minimizing future regret. I think that's how I would sum it in one sentence.
Okay, that's
So,
actually,
so that was
yeah.
kind of my thought, because I feel like, finding the right spouse, like, yeah, if you're like dating someone, like if you were to break it off, the thought, like, okay, so would you regret breaking it off, or would you regret more, not breaking it off? And they've talked about that, the regrets are the things that eat at you at the end of life. So it's kind of just like weighing those, and like, it can be like that minimizing future regret can be applied, I feel like, any of those other bullet points. It's like, what is going to cause the least amount of regret? Like, you're okay with making the decision regardless of the result? Like, if you are, just do the thing you're thinking of doing.
Okay, so I guess just to sort of also elaborate, so the regret can be broken into two distinct differences, right? You can have the
True.
regret of inaction or the regret of action.
Yep.
So I guess he further breaks it down by saying most long-term things. So like when you're thinking long-term, most people regret inaction, like they regret not doing something, versus in the short term. And I think this came to like more dating. People regret like not taking action. Sorry, or am I getting that backwards? In the short term, I think people regret more actions. In the long term, I think people regret more inactions.
I think he gave the example of like food, like, you're at a restaurant, you've had a good meal, and you shouldn't get that dessert, but you order the dessert. So that was an action that, in the short term you're gonna regret. Um, I think I'm remembering that
Yeah,
right. Like
I think
those
that's
short
correct.
term pleasures,
Right. Yeah.
you
Man,
regret. Yeah.
so the other thing I wanted to sort of just touch on is, yeah, the first half I feel like you touched on well, but the last half by living an authentic life, and I think
Mhm.
to him, like his big thing is like the pursuit of truth. And I feel like just, yeah, by being authentic, one of the things I feel like that can mean is like just essentially being truthful, like just telling the truth. And even if in the, you know, telling the truth can be very uncomfortable at times. Uh,
Yeah, it can not only be uncomfortable, it can also, well, let's think of reasons like why you wouldn't tell the truth.
Usually I can speak from experience when I've tried to skirt the truth, it's almost always trying to shield someone's emotions. It's always trying to protect someone from feeling bad. But
What about being dependent on money too? Like your paycheck. Like if you're asked to do something and like you need that money. Like you can't really tell them what you really think, or like you if you didn't really want to do something, or so sometimes you're kind of just like beholden to doing something for the monetary compensation too, I would say.
okay, yes, that's true. I did not think of it in those terms. I was thinking it more in terms of when in the past, like I wouldn't want to tell partners certain things. So I just more or less would tell like white lies. But in the end, it always makes it harder.
Wait,
Like
when you say partners, you mean like at work or like people you're dating?
people I'm dating.
Ah, okay.
But in the end, it always makes it harder. And I actually heard Jordan Peterson say this, like something very similar. It's like you should always just tell the truth, even if it's uncomfortable in the moment. It will shield you from much more displeasure in the future. And I think that is true.
Can you give like maybe an example you're comfortable sharing?
Uh, I can't even really
Like, is he saying like, if you're, the girl you're dating asked like if I look
like,
good in this outfit, like,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
I
that's like
mean,
such a cliche example, but like, if someone wants you to like do something and like they want you to do something really badly, but you hate doing it. Instead of being honest and being like, yeah, I don't want to do this, like I don't like this, I'm not going to go do this, you just sort of acquiesce and like do it to appease them. It's going to build the model that you then continually do these things that you don't want to do. So in the future, instead of not having to do it, you're going to be roped into constantly doing this.
that's a good,
I
yeah.
can't think of I, you've put me on the spot, and I can't think of a good example like off the top of my head, but this has happened to me very frequently, and I feel like I haven't really learned from it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I mean, I feel like yeah, finding the right. I don't know, do you have any other parts on that?
Uh, I don't think so. I mean, I guess I would just say, you mean like on the spouse or profession part?
I mean, I feel like
Or
finding the first two I feel like are kind of obvious, like
yeah.
that they dominate such a large part of your life. Uh, like, I mean, most people work around 8 hours a day, 8 or 9 hours a day. So that takes up a third of your day. And then the remainder of the day, you're usually, if you're married, spend dealing with your spouse.
Hmm.
So I feel like if those two things are in good working order, you're probably going to be happy. But if you have someone, if you're with someone that like drives you nuts, and if you're working a job that you don't like and don't find purpose in, you're probably going to be unhappy.
Hmm.
I guess I wanted the one that really stuck out to me was the moderation one,
Hmm.
seeking the sweet spot. So across many, I mean, he says many life domains. Uh, so I think for a balanced life, this is very true. And he talks about this inverted U. So I guess
Hmm.
for the listeners, what he's saying is that if you just draw a U and then flip it upside down, you would have like a hill. And at the edges of the end of the letter, you have the two extremes. So like being either totally apathetic towards some desire, or you're like all in. And he's saying the best place to be is in the middle. That generates the most happiness.
Yeah, I think it kind of talks about it like with every trait.
Right. It
Yeah.
seems sort of universal. I guess the point the point I was going to make was I think for a balanced, happy life, that is probably the mindset you want. But I think if you want to truly be the best or like the top, 0.1% of any given field, do you think that's a mindset you can adopt?
Um, I I I do. I think I mean he goes through all the like a lot of the Nobel Prize winners, how they're kind of trained in or they followed some other passion too on the side. So I guess it's not being so extreme in the one thing. Like in a lot of the Nobel Prize winners are adept at a musical instrument. Like so they have hobbies outside. Like they are, it seems like somewhat balanced. Well also I'd say this inverted U, I mean, it's also just for like for survival. Just having like living on the earth a long period of time, like so like confidence, let's say. So like little confidence is not good, but overconfidence would like is basically recklessness. So like if you're overconfident or over optimistic that everything will turn out well, you're probably not going to live that long. Because
Yeah, I mean
you're uh-huh.
it's like the ideal soldier. Like you don't want a soldier that's so scared they won't run out of the bunker, but you don't want a soldier so reckless that they'll just run out into gunfire.
Uh-huh.
You
But
need someone.
yeah, I mean, to answer your question, like, I think a lot of professions, like, I think you can be very good and still be balanced, I guess is what I'm like, and I think, I don't know, what do you think? Because I think talent plays a big role. And so, like, if certain people are especially suited for a certain thing, it might not come off as unbalanced in their eyes, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
So I was thinking actually, I mean, the Nobel Prize point is, I think, good. But I was thinking more in terms of like sports.
Okay.
So I mean, like Kobe Bryant comes to mind.
Uh-huh.
Kobe Bryant, like Jordan, they sort of come to mind. I mean, with like some of the tennis guys, I don't think you see it as much. But like with Djokovic, like I think you kind of see it more with Djokovic than like Nadal or Federer. I don't think they're balanced. Like I think that is their life. And I think you see it the most with probably like listening to Kobe talk. Like, yeah, he may have had other hobbies, but he was hyper focused on basketball. He
Mm-hmm.
was playing basketball every single day for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like to actually be the absolute best in something, I feel like that you need a more extreme. I'm not saying you have to be like all in, but I think you do need a more extreme mindset
Well, I guess I would
for
say like, yeah, those are like really extremes. But like to just like just make it in the profession, like I think you can be balanced. I think there are
oh,
balanced,
sure.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, right.
balanced
Uh,
NBA players, balanced soccer players. And one thing I think with tennis that's kind of interesting, especially like I mean like singles players, like they don't have the interactions as much as the players on team sports. Same with golfers. So I always have found them a little bit off, like their personality is a little bit off because I think there's less, and he talks about this in sports like and I think soccer is like you learn to deal with other people and
sure.
I mean deal with other people. You have to learn to be creative. You have to learn to deal with negative outcomes, even if you're trying. And I think there was one other he pointed out about sports, but I mean that did stick out to me. I thought about tennis players actually. Yeah, because Djokovic does seem a tad extreme. Like, I mean, you hear about his stretching routines and just how much time he spends on his tennis aspects. It does, you're right. That to me, I would say does seem extreme.
So like what I'm saying is like I think Federer was exactly the same way. I just think he hit it better.
Really? Because I've read things on Federer and he seemed, and maybe it was in Mastery we actually read about Federer, but because because they were kind of like breaking down, the specialist versus the generalist, and Federer for a long time was a generalist. I mean, he liked wrestling. There was some other interests he had.
Sure,
Um,
but like when he really, I mean, I just heard him give an interview when someone was talking to him about like his warm up before a tournament, and the
mhm,
guy was talking about like how like sort of casual he seemed just warming up like a couple days before the tournament. And then Federer goes, all of the preparation was done months ago when he
uh-huh,
would be playing for like 4 or 5 hours a day.
uh-huh,
And it's like at that point, like, yeah, because like right before you're not going to get anything, but once before, that's when the work is done. And
mhm. But I
I
guess,
think
uh-huh,
I'm just saying, like, I think to be, you know, obviously there can only be one person in the best, but to be even like the top 20, I feel like you need a much more extreme mindset. Like even when I think about like my own profession, like chemistry, like to be a top tier professor, like I remember my advisor saying he essentially just read papers 10 hours a day for like 10 years.
mhm,
I haven't done that.
uh-huh. But I guess when you compare that to like Federer playing 4 hours a day, like I mean, there's people that work, I mean, McDonald's that are working more than 4 hours a day at McDonald's. So like, are you
Sure.
saying just because he's playing 4 hours a day, he can't be balanced? I mean, he does have, a wife, he has kids. I don't know what his personal life is like, but I would think he would still be able to be balanced if he's really playing, I don't want to say like only. I mean, 4 hours of physical activity is a lot, but if you put it in terms of other professions and how much other people are working just in an hour term, you would think you'd be able to fit in a lot of other, I
Yeah.
guess,
I guess that's a fair point. That is a fair point.
like, yeah, curious endeavors.
Sure. I
But
think
yeah,
okay.
I mean,
That-
yeah. I mean, Ronaldo, I bet, I mean, I've heard other players talk about how he comes off as extreme, and that a lot of players say Ronaldo is like not their friend outside of soccer. Like he's not a person you want to like go hang with or spend time with outside of work. I mean, because that's what they are. They're like work buddies. Like a lot of players just,
Just
yeah, consider.
because he's so extreme or because like everything is dictated around
it's
soccer,
it's it's so extreme. Like he's very meticulous about his
his
diet,
diet.
his
Yeah.
training. He spends tons of money on mineral water. I mean, everything is planned out. Um, and so yeah, man, I mean, I guess you can
But
say it's
I
unbalanced, but according to Gad Saad, it's number two, his profession. So
but
they're probably happy.
I guess sort of dovetailing that doesn't seem very I think it is you probably have a more happy life to be more balanced, more fulfilled
Mhm.
than
Maybe.
being extreme.
Well, actually, there was also some, and I had this page pinned, but like regrets, and I think Doc G talked about this in Taking Stock, where
Yeah,
he's
the regrets of
take
life.
yeah end of
Yeah,
regrets. So
same ones.
I think these are the same ones,
They are.
and I'm guessing I don't know if he read Doc G's book. I'm guessing he probably did.
It's from a
Uh,
study.
it's from a study.
Yeah, it's from a study.
So Doc G didn't like do the study, you think?
He says it in the book.
Did he? I don't know. Okay, well, here are the top five regrets. Number one, I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Two, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number three, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Number four, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Number 5, I wish I had let myself be happier.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is from Bronnie Ware, a palliative nurse who cared for people in the last stages of life. And
Okay.
she recorded the top 5 regrets that people shared with her on their deathbeds.
Okay, cool. Um, I mean, number 2 is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So I wonder, like, looking, like, do you think Kobe Bryant well, I mean, unfortunately he's dead. But like Michael
No,
Jordan, do you think he has regretted working so hard?
at basketball, no.
Mm-hmm. So that's, yeah.
But like I feel okay. I feel like there's a difference because like
Uh-huh.
he, at least in the we don't need to get into who the best is. At least in the 90s, he was without a doubt considered the greatest basketball player, right? Probably most of
Mm-hmm.
some of the 80s too. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, yeah, I feel like you make that trade, right?
Mm-hmm. So I guess the thing is, this is, yeah, not for everyone, but so who the people that did work like too much, then that they're regretting, like what types of people do you think those people are?
Some mid-level like management dude at some dead-end job. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're probably right. I think God Saad kind of touched like on this idea of your actual self not being aligned with your ideal self. So that, yeah, they're like not living their truest life. And
Right.
it's like where
Yeah.
there's a misalignment that they would regret working too hard in something they didn't really feel aligned with.
Care about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I feel like a lot of people take jobs that they don't really care about.
yeah. That's
Or
true.
the job morphs into something, you maybe at one time thought you cared about it, kind of morphs into something that isn't.
Yeah. So,
I remember the first time we read this list, I didn't understand this, but the fifth one, I wish I had let myself be happier.
mhm.
What does that mean to you?
I think I would interpret that as I would say, I mean, the thoughts that come to my mind, I would say most people are tougher on others than themselves, or sorry, tougher on themselves than others. Like they're more critical of their actions and yeah, they're just very critical of what they've done or their decisions or why they're not good enough or blah blah blah. Whereas they're not as critical as others. And I think it would be better to treat yourself a little bit more like how you treat others in that respect, and not be so critical of yourself
Sure,
and kind of just enjoy, just accept the process.
sure.
Um, those are the things that come into my mind. I also like it's kind of, I guess the question comes back to like yeah, how do you define like happiness? Like it's kind of hard to define.
So
Uh,
I still always, he actually he put the passage in from the book, uh, from the A Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know. Do you remember reading that?
yeah, yeah, the Viktor Frankl, yeah, I
Right,
remember,
but
yeah,
he put the passage in that like a lot of people just say, I don't have the page turned down, but he said a lot of people say they want to like achieve happiness and success,
hmm
but he then talks about in the passage like how by the actual pursuit of only happiness or success, you drive it away.
hmm
It it's just something that happiness and success aren't something that you search out. They're just something that ensues from your actions. And I feel like that's probably the best way to think about it.
yeah. Here, I got the page. It says, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effects of one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do and go on to carry it out to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run, I say, Success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl, wise man. I still say when people ask me like a book to read,
That's the one you give.
that's the one I give. Yep.
It's one of the ones I give too.
Yeah. And actually I would go one step further. I would say if you can only read one book over and over again, that would be the book I would pick.
Interesting. I guess it depends what I would be reading it for.
Just life. Like if you can only read one book, if you can only
Cool.
understand the message from one book, that would be the book I would tell people to take in.
Well, that book has a very powerful message.
Yes. So there was one I mean a couple like maybe just fun discussions. He pointed out he was talking about polymaths at one point and how, he likes people that, pursue all sorts of different activities. And he was listing his like 10 historical figures to invite to a party. Like I don't have a list, but like who are some of the people that come to mind of people that you would be interested in meeting?
Uh, I mean, I would be really interested in talking to people from different time periods. So like, I mean, Einstein, he had Einstein in there. Einstein would have
Yep.
been interesting. Newton would have been interesting. Uh, so like some type of, I would be very interested in talking to either some type of like medieval king from England or France for as well as some type of like Japanese shogunate,
Okay.
like feudal Japan. Uh, just like totally different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Genghis Khan. I mean, not that I would want to really interact with Genghis Khan, but I'm sure it would be very interesting to sit
Mm-hmm.
down and at least meet him. Um, I mean, from an intellectual standpoint, yeah, there would be maybe some chemists in the 60s that would be very interesting to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Are there any people right now in like media, well, it can be anywhere that you would consider like kind of like polymaths?
that I personally know.
Not necessarily personally, but like that you follow or like, I mean, Gad Saad is, I mean, he kind of, he does like span the spectrum, I guess. But are there any other people that come to mind on people that can talk a lot about different
I,
topics and,
I mean, I feel like Taleb can too.
uh-huh. I would agree.
Uh,
Taleb is, yeah.
Taleb is I find I mean he Taleb to me is always more like I feel like he's more in your face about it about like
Mm-hmm.
how much smarter he is than you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really get that from God. Uh Trying to
Like,
think.
would you consider Robert Greene
Yeah, okay. Sure.
or trying to think of
Actually,
other,
no, no,
or
I
not
don't
really?
I don't think I would for him.
Okay.
Like I don't think Robert like I don't think he could talk on a scientific level like these other two guys, or like a deep technical level about some aspects. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like these two can talk about. Like he can give you a very detailed overview of, I guess, people's like psychology and like I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Motivations. But it's just I feel like it's just different when you can talk at like a hyper technical level in one field and then still be able to do that outside. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if Robert Greene had that.
Okay,
I mean,
so like,
I feel like you have someone in mind. So why don't you just tell me who you have in mind?
no, I don't really. I'm
Oh,
kind of just like spitting, like, yeah, I don't really have anyone in mind. I'm kind of just trying to like, actually, now that there was one other, Jacob Lund Fisker, I kind
sure.
of thought
I sort of, yeah, I
he
could see
kind of had a
that.
same like writing style. Like he doesn't want to be like, pinned down in like one category. He likes to move back and forth and go where, his curiosity takes him.
I mean, and he has an entire chapter on generalists for specialists. Isn't
Yeah.
that like the second chapter of his book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So just kind of interesting to
I mean,
I,
Schiff,
I'm
I sort of dovetailing back. I would be interested in talking to Schiff. I don't really think he would be considered a polymath, but he would be interesting. He
yeah,
is he's pretty good though. He has a very strong grasp on history.
yeah. Oh yeah, like that's a good pick. Um, yeah. So any
Uh,
other, I guess the only other note I had, I mean, I didn't write a ton of notes for this one, but the other item I thought worth mentioning is like consuming like goods versus experiences. And he brought up that consuming like the leisure consumption does have a positive correlation with happiness. And um I guess I'll just yeah, like I mean, does this surprise you at all? And how, like, kind of how do you view this?
the leisure consumption,
Yeah,
does it surprise me?
yeah.
No, not really.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't
Does
surprise
it
me at
surprise
all.
you?
No, not at all. Like those other like the material goods, like it would surprise me if there was studies and those material goods actually made people happier. That would surprise me. But like yeah, like consuming experiences and Uh, but that also might, like, you know, I feel like people don't really think of like, or maybe they do, like taking out like a lot of debt to go on like a crazy experience trip.
Yeah, that was an interesting point.
Whereas like you would, take out a mortgage on a house or take out, car loan. But a lot of people, I haven't really heard of someone explicitly saying, "Yeah, I'm taking out a loan specifically for my trip to Africa for me to traverse this." Or
I think people do that for their wedding though.
interesting.
I've
Okay,
heard of people taking out loans for their weddings,
yeah, I have heard that. Yeah,
which essentially would be not quite the same, but sort of the same.
yeah. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah. So at least rationalizes like taking out debt for something like that then.
Uh,
So.
one of the other, I guess, just one of the other topics that he brought up that I feel like really sort of also stuck out to me was pursuing variety seeking at times across many domains. Uh, I feel like I sometimes want more of this. Like uh, a lot of times my job can become somewhat repetitive.
Mhm.
And yeah, the seeking variety, like even within my job, I remember when it becomes super repetitive, I just start craving to do different type of work within my job.
Mhm.
And then I always try and seek out like other projects that just give me more luck for like lack of better, like more stimulation.
Mhm.
Because I just feel like, yeah, I just need something else. Even that's, I mean, a lot of that is sort of, in many regards, a lot of that's how, I mean, in some regards, this podcast sort of started. I mean, I feel like I got so like bogged down in grad school and I became so like hyper focused. I just needed something else, which is why I started reading all these other things.
Mhm.
Um, and got I don't know if you remember, but like when I got really into like the Cobb building and the well you've probably surpassed me in the Cobb building, but the cordwood building and
Mhm.
the masonry work, just like other things that were intellectually stimulating to someone that had never done them, but probably to someone that was a pro is very boring.
Mhm. No, it's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, balance helps in a lot of areas for sure. Um,
It's weird. Like before we read this book, I was talking to mom and dad about how I feel like I in many regards lack a lot of balance
mhm.
in my life, and how I feel like I need to adopt more hobbies outside of pickleball to become sort of a more balanced person.
Mhm. So going forward, how do you project yourself? What are you gonna adopt as, yeah, how's your life gonna look if you tone down the pickleball?
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't really I haven't really decided yet, but I think I'm going to try and do at least pick one new hobby Probably starting in June. Like I have like tournaments booked out essentially to the end of May. I'm gonna like pick one new hobby and try and do it once a week
Oh,
outside of
that's a
anything
good.
else.
What hobbies like are in consideration right now?
Just thinking about maybe some dance classes, like some type of yoga, maybe rock climbing. I don't know, something probably still relatively physically active.
Physical. Okay.
I could see trying to find like a board game group. I haven't really decided yet.
Okay. All those sound good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have? What did you think of the ensuring that one is persistent in the pursuit of meaningful goals?
Um, Meaningful goals. Wait,
Like
can you read the first part again?
ensuring that one is persistent in the pursuit of meaningful goals. I guess like to me,
Uh-huh.
the point of this was like he was saying like a lot of times you just need to face rejection, but you have to just keep going. And
Hmm.
it's like the balance of like when do you know that enough is enough versus like when should you keep going? Like I think
Yeah,
that's the real
that's the
like
part where he says like, reality kind of hits. And this was kind of my point with like sometimes like the talent factor plays maybe more of a role than people want to give
admit.
it credit for, perhaps. Because like, yeah, like I mean, if you're a 36-year-old or 40-year-old and you haven't played soccer and then you say, yeah, I'm going to go be a professional soccer player. Like, I mean, you can be persistent about it, but like it's just like, I mean, physiologically insanely unlikely that you're going to be able to do that. Um
I mean, the sad truth about that scenario is that even if you got good enough that you could, no one's going to give you a pro contract, your first pro contract at 40,
yeah. Yeah.
just because it's like, what's the point?
Yeah. So there's some of that I mean the persistency, yeah, I guess I mean it is an interesting question. Like how do you or what time frame should you be reevaluating your goals? Like if they're, set in reality. Um and this is something that I've kind of been or like the persistency of certain things. I don't know if you've heard Raoul Paul talk. Some of his recent stuff has kind of been hitting me like in a funny way. A lot of his research is essentially just showing that all the, I guess, wealth is just the function of like demographics, and that can kind of be depressing because it kind of makes you think like what I'm doing. It literally doesn't matter. It like nothing. It doesn't really matter what you're pursuing. Like it's going up or down based off of these other things that are totally out of your control. And that feeling that you're not in control, I have not been liking. But I think continue like feeling like there's hope and that you have a purpose is important. So I think just being persistent on any goal, I would say, that gives you like some sort of hope or meaning, I think is good. Uh, but to the point, like if it's not set in reality, then yeah, it's just hard to say, like I guess. But if you're happy, I mean, who cares really?
Yeah, I guess that was my next question. Like, even if it's like an illogical goal, if it gives you purpose and makes you happy, doesn't matter that you're still pursuing it.
Right.
Like
And
you're
that's
doing
kind
it.
of why I don't know if you've heard it's kind of like I don't know how I describe it, like a double-edged sword. Like it seems, and Patrick Bet David tells a story of this like foreigner that he knew, and they're sitting in the living room. The guy is a Spanish speaker, and they're watching an English show, and the guy just keeps laughing. The guy that only speaks Spanish, and then Patrick like turns to some guy. He's like, "How does he know what he's saying?" And then he's got no idea. He's got no idea, but he's just like a happy person, and like he was not like educated, but he can it's just like, and the point Patrick Bet David was trying to make was, it seems like sometimes the less you know, the more happier you can be. Because the more
Sure.
you know, then you get colder and harsher to the realities of
Yeah.
life. And then you become more skeptical of people, and
Cynical, right.
yeah, and then you become less happy. So that,
I
like, that
totally
story comes to mind.
I totally feel that. Uh yeah,
Yeah.
I 100% feel that.
Yeah.
I feel like I've
So,
seen that too. Like, I mean,
mhm.
that's why like people, I feel like a lot of times people become like sort of miserly and kind of colder the older they get. It's like it's rare to see like a child so like harsh and cold that's not happy, right? I
Yeah. Yeah.
think probably for those reasons.
I mean, I found myself getting harsh yesterday when I went to this bubble tea place. Says they close at 9:30. I get in 9:20. They say they're out of bubbles. I'm like, there's no way you're out of bubbles. Uh, and like they just cleaned it up and they didn't want to make a drink. So I just left. But I was like, I'm getting way too emotional. I'm getting like, I'm
Right.
like, kids back were like, if they owned this place, there's no way they would have said they're out of bubbles. Or
Oh,
like
yeah. I mean, I still remember from when we were like 6 or 7, we went into
Dutch Village.
Dutch Village and they
Yeah.
wouldn't serve us ice cream. And
Yep.
Dad had that like same tirade. It's like, if
Yeah.
they owned it, they would make the ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking, actually. So I guess that affected both of us.
God, yeah.
Oh man.
Um,
Okay. I don't know. Any other thoughts, or should we start winding down?
uh, yeah, I mean, overall, I thought it was a good book. I was glad. I would feel like I feel like this was probably one of the best picks I've had in a while.
Hmm. Well, I
Uh,
forget, what was your, I actually, what were some of your last ones? I
I'm
didn't
just
think any
saying,
of you.
I don't think I had any bad picks. I'm just saying I think this was probably one of my better picks that I've had in
Okay.
a while.
Okay.
Just like the whole package. It was like easy to read,
Uh-huh.
not that long, relatively. It's like a good life message. It's like,
Yep. True.
like how to get more fulfillment out of your life is usually like a good message to have.
Hmm.
I like Gad Saad. I like listening to him. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. That sounds good. And I guess next up we have, let's see here. We have Michael Lewis's Going Infinite. And this is talking about the Sam Bankman-Fried story. And I don't know if you heard, but he's just got sentenced, I believe it was 25 years. And Michael
Interesting.
Lewis had been following him for a while, I think for maybe months. I mean, I haven't started reading this yet, but um, I remember hearing stories about right when the stuff with FTX started going down, and someone found out that Michael Lewis had been following him, and they like contacted his PR person to like ask him about him, but like the guy just said like, "Oh, I guess you just gonna have to wait for the book." So I think this will be a good book. I don't think
It's
it's
not that
only
long.
like 200 and
250.
yeah, 250. And Michael, if you've read Michael Lewis books before, like Liar's Poker or The Big Short, all those read really well. So I'm excited to start it.
Yeah.
And that's episode 99. So this, yeah. So we're coming in on episode 100.
The
So,
big the
and
big fellow.
the big fellow. So with that, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. We have new affiliates, new recover, 10% off with the link below, and longer standing Enchamacha, 20% off with the link below. With that, I'm Jack Alwell, and with me, as always, is Alex Alwell, my brother. Al, until next time.
Till next time, Jack.